We are hardwired to resist change. So when you have a team member or a colleague or a friend or a family member who is instantly resistant to anything that you suggest that's deviating from the norm, it's not actually them trying to be difficult, it's their physiology at play. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of LeadWell with Jacqui, where we are talking about this hardwired resistance that humans have to change, what is driving that resistance to change from a neurological perspective, and a really simple strategy that you can implement that can work through this resistance to change. So let's start with why. Why are humans so resistant to change? Well, in a nutshell, in a skull, it's our brain. Our brains are hardwired to resist change. Keep in mind that our brains have been designed for survival rather than innovation. When we were roaming on the Serengeti, we needed to prioritize our survival above all other things. And therefore, a deviation from what is familiar and what is predictable in our brain is interpreted as a threat and triggers a threat response. So our amygdala, which is a part of our brain, our limbic system in our brain, right in the middle of the brain, processes fear and emotional responses, and it has that kind of anxiety-based reaction to uncertainty, but it doesn't interpret physical threat as any different from emotional threat or even not real threat, potential threat. Our amygdala responds in the same way by releasing emotions such as fear, worry, anxiety, frustration, and usually resistance. So you might have heard me share this with you before, but our brains take up about 2% of our overall body mass, but they use somewhere between 20 and 25% of our body's energy. So our brains are these massive energy suckers, and so they need to be as efficient as possible in their processes to keep us safe, but also to avoid wasting energy. Because we need our energy to run away from the saber-toothed tigers, right? So when our brain receives any information or experiences a new stimuli or input that conflicts with our current situation or our current beliefs or habits, then that is what drives this term you might have heard of called cognitive dissonance. And that creates mental discomfort. It feels uncomfortable. And we are driven to avoid discomfort, and therefore we avoid what makes us uncomfortable, so we avoid change. One of the reasons that the brain desperately needs this level of certainty, as I've said, is because of the amount of energy that uncertainty creates. So certainty reduces our cognitive load. Uncertainty increases our cognitive load, which prompts the release of stress hormones like cortisol and drives anxiety and resistance to any new behaviors, new experiences, and different habits. So at a really practical level, what happens is our brain receives thousands of points of stimuli every second, right? There's always constant input. So I want to introduce you to the approach avoidance response. What that is when the brain has any kind of stimuli, it will tag that stimuli as either this is safe and familiar approach, or this is unsafe, unfamiliar, avoid. At its really basic terms, and it will tag it very, very rapidly. Something like within a quarter of a second, your brain has already tagged whatever that stimuli is as either good or bad. And it will base that tagging on previous lived experience. So if someone in your team, for example, or if you have experienced change and it has had a detrimental outcome for you, your brain is more likely to tag any future change as avoid. That's not safe. We've been here before. It's not going to assess each new stimuli on its own individual merit because that is too high of a cognitive load. It takes literally and physiologically too much oxygen, too much glucose, too much energy for us to take and interpret every single stimuli individually. So it takes our lived experience, creates a tag to any input, any stimuli, and instantly will tag it as approach or avoid. Now, something to be really conscious of is that we feel the pain of loss twice as much as we feel the pleasure of gain. Our brain is significantly more risk averse. So when I show a diagram of this approach avoid response, it has two arrows, an away avoid arrow on one side and an approach reward arrow on the other side. The away avoid arrow is twice as big. Our brain is so much more likely to be risk averse and tag something, especially if it's unknown, uncertain, or creates that cognitive dissonance. So it's different to our current norm or beliefs. It's significantly more likely to tag that new thing as not safe, as threat. Let me run away from it. Cortisol is released. We initiate this stress response. We move into fight or flight. So let's say, for example, you have had a team who have been working from home most of the time for the past 5 years. And then you say, hey, guys, you all need to come back into the office now. What do you think their brains are going to tag this new input with? Probably threat, avoid. This isn't safe. This is different to what my current comfortable situation is. And I remember the change when we moved into working from home was so filled with uncertainty and fear because it was in the midst of COVID. So your brain is going, oh, we've been here before. It's awful. We're not going to do that again. And so you're going to be encountering this real fear-based resistance to change. David Rock from the Neuro Leadership Institute has done some amazing research, and I'll actually put the specific paper that this is based upon in the comments or in the episode blurb because it's really easy to read. You don't have to be an academic. So what his research showed are 5 key areas that determine how likely our brain is to tag something as threat versus reward or away versus approach. Same thing, different language. So those 5 domains make up what we refer to as the SCARF framework or the SCARF model. So it's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So these are those 5 social factors that help to influence whether our brain goes into approach or avoid. Here's an example of some social threats that apply to each of those 5 areas, and then we're going to really drill down into each of the 5 in more detail. And then I'm going to tell you how you can use it in the real world. First, fear of losing status. So let's say a manager or a team member who is resisting the use of an AI tool because they are fearful that their knowledge and expertise is no longer valued. What about certainty? If you announce that change is coming and don't give all of the details for that change, you're likely to have a team who are in that avoid, fight or flight response because they don't have certainty. They can't predict what's going to happen, and we know the brain doesn't like uncertainty. Autonomy. Perhaps you have picked up a new team member, or maybe you've moved into a new role and you're trying to get more on top of things, so you're a little bit closer to the work than you would normally be, a little bit more micromanaging, perhaps. That is going to, what we would say, scarf a team member and push them into that threat response. Perhaps someone feels like they're missing out or they're being left out. Maybe your team is a little bit cliquey and two of your team members go for lunch together every day and one sits at their desk every day. That's going to impact their need for relatedness. And then perhaps this happens actually a lot when there are redundancies. People's need for fairness is really challenged. Why did that person lose their job, but that person didn't, or but I didn't? Fairness is a really difficult one, and we'll talk about it in more detail, but I want to flag here the difference between equality and equity. Fairness is not necessarily equality, which is giving everyone the same thing. Rather, that it is about equity, giving everyone the same opportunity to succeed and being transparent when decisions are being made. So let's work through each of these 5 social domains. Starting with status. Status is our relative importance compared to others. So status is really the reason that it feels good to win a running race, for example. Because as humans, yes, we are a social species, but we're always trying to figure out where we sit in the hierarchy compared to others around us. Some people have a significant need for status, and so they may really thrive if they get a new job title or if they get a better office. I know that when we've had people moving desks, we've had a bit of a desk rearrangement with moving departments or whatever, where people get to sit is a huge can be a huge challenge. And a lot of the time that's related to status. I've been here longer, I should get to sit next to the window in the corner desk, for example. The way that you can appeal to people's status is simply by bringing them along on the journey and really acknowledging their expertise. For example, ask them more than you tell them. So telling someone something, giving someone feedback in a bit of a clunky way, these are things that can really disrupt and challenge people's need for status. But asking lots of questions, bringing people along on the journey, being very transparent, and also giving people an opportunity to grow. So in the same way that status is an example, that status is the reason that we like winning a running race, it's about that continuous improvement and growth. So if you're able to give your team stretch goals, stretch challenges, maybe they get to do a course, maybe they get to learn a new skill, those sorts of things will also support people with a higher status need. Next is certainty, which is exactly as it sounds, our ability to predict the future. This is what drives a lot of pain in change management processes, because people have a need for certainty, and most of the time they want answers to questions that don't have answers yet. So the real key to supporting people's need for certainty and avoiding them going into that threat response: communicate, 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 communicate when there's nothing to communicate. So often people who are driving a change process will just not give an update when there's no update to give, which seems like a very efficient decision to make. However, our brains like completeness of information. So if you are not giving information, even if it's just to say, we're currently in this stage of the process, we are waiting to hear back on this component, no movement has been made. If you don't do that, people will fill in the blanks with things like, they're not telling us because there's going to be mass redundancies, or I've been left out of this whole process. I don't even know what's going on. Why do I even bother trying? You get some really not so rational responses because our brain is moving into that threat state. So making sure that you're communicating, making explicit the implicit. So making sure that you verbalize and bring things out into the open, and don't make assumptions like, oh, well, you should know that, or you've been here long enough to know, or, you know, maybe it's someone's mature enough or someone's experienced enough. No, don't assume. Say it, and then say it again. The next one is autonomy. This actually, I really like the definition of autonomy being having a sense of control over our events, choices, or our work. And really, it's about giving choice. So to support people's need for autonomy, give them a choice where a choice is able to be given. So if you're working in a really highly regulated environment, or perhaps, decisions are being just handed down to you, and that is preventing you from giving your team much choice, find something that you can give them choice on. So that might be, we got to move through in this way. Which way would you prefer to do it? Or here's our end goal. What are your thoughts in terms of, steps to get there? Or even as simple as, if you want people to come into the office, for example, autonomy is, which days would you like to be in the office? Which days work for you? Instead of, you need to be in the office on these days, that takes away autonomy. So just trying to create choice points where you can is going to give people autonomy back. The next is relatedness. This is how safe we feel with others and our sense of belonging. This is usually quite high in a lot of people, especially people in people-facing industries, right? So a lot of the people that I work with, leaders, have a relatively high need for relatedness. Relatedness is in threat or challenge often when we're meeting people that we don't know, when our trust has been broken, when we've been let down, or when we feel excluded. What you can do to build people's sense of relatedness is just to show genuine interest, build actual connection. Make sure you allocate at least 1 or 2 minutes at the beginning of each one-on-one with each team member to ask how they are, what's going on outside of work. Not everyone wants to share that, and that's okay too, but trying to find some common ground will help with people's sense of relatedness. Relatedness is why we have end-of-month drinks or team lunches or Kris Kringle. We do those things to enhance a sense of relatedness and cohesion within our team. It is a hardwired physiological need for most. And then finally, fairness. This is how fair we perceive things to be. So there was an interesting study that was done actually where the subjects in this study showed a greater sense of reward in their brains when they received 50 cents than when they received $10. And the reason for that is because when they received 50 cents, they got 50 cents out of a possible dollar. when they got $10, they got $10 out of a possible 50. And so that is an example of this level of fairness overruling anything else. It's not about how much people get. It's about how much people are getting relative to everyone else. So, of course, this is why we need to make sure that we are eliminating discrimination, not just from the workplace, but for everywhere. We want to make sure that we have really clear ground rules and that everyone is held to those ground rules. Fairness is one of those interesting ones that can be impacted if you have a team member who is not meeting expectation and is not being held accountable for failing to meet expectation, it actually will impact the rest of the team's sense of fairness. Because it's not fair that I'm meeting expectations, that person's not meeting expectations, and there's no consequence. So that's something to keep in mind. Fairness thrives when there is transparency, when there is clarity in decision-making, when expectations are clear. This is where having a team workshop to determine a team charter of behaviours can be helpful, because everyone as a collective, this leans into relatedness as well, everyone as a collective agrees together what's important to us as a team. And so that feels like a real sense of fairness because we're all creating the rules that we have to abide by. Another thing you can help that can help with fairness is helping people to see things from others' perspectives. So, everyone brings their own lived experience to every situation and scenario. So if you're able to help illuminate the different perspectives in the room, it can help to reduce those biases and increase that sense of fairness. So that is the SCARF model. And there are a couple of different ways that I recommend using this and that I myself use this in my own leadership and that I use with my clients. And also I conduct workshops and things on this. So the first way that you can use this information is more of a broad sweep, what I refer to as a bit of a checklist. So if your team are maybe not seeming as harmonious as you would like, or perhaps you have a change process that you're needing to implement, use this little checklist to go, okay, how am I appealing when I'm delivering this news or this information, or when I'm briefing this work, how am I appealing to my team's sense of status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness? Am I leveraging their expertise to ensure status? Am I giving as much information as I can to ensure certainty? Am I providing adequate choice points for a sense of autonomy? Am I bringing everyone along on the journey together and building genuine connection to ensure relatedness? And am I being transparent with my decision making? Am I allowing the team to support in creating those rules of conduct? And am I making sure that I'm applying equity to my decisions to ensure that sense of fairness? So that's kind of the broad sweep, using this as a bit of a checklist. You can also use it for yourself. So you might say, gosh, I'm really resisting this. What's going on for me here? You could use these 5 areas. Okay, which of these is starting to feel like I'm missing out or there's a gap? And then you can start to think about how you might be able to bridge that. The other way you can use this information is a lot more specific. The Neuro Leadership Institute have a free questionnaire, which the link of which is in the caption, where you are actually able to do a really short questionnaire online, and they will email you with which of these 5 domains is more valuable to your brain. So they'll give you a score for each of the 5 out of 7, which does make them look pretty close. What I always suggest is focus on the order rather than the numbers if they are pretty close, because that's going to give you an indication of what's most important to you and what you can really lean on. When I worked in leadership and when I had a team, every single person who has ever reported to me has done that questionnaire. And when I have asked them to do it, I have retaken it as well. Mine hasn't changed very much over the years, but I will take it as well. And then I will invite them to share their results with me. But I will always offer to share mine first. And what that does is it allows for this really rich conversation around what is important to your brain and what is important to my brain, and how are those things different. So as an example, I worked with someone once. They did the questionnaire. Relatedness was their lowest. It was very, very low, the lowest I've seen. Just wasn't something that's important to them, but certainty was very, very high. It won't come as a surprise to anyone to realize or to learn that relatedness is very, very high for me. And so that allowed us to have a conversation. So I said to this person, relatedness is your lowest. How does that show up for you? And they said, it drives me nuts when we get into a meeting and people talk about their weekend, what they're doing that night, just stuff that's not related to work. It really annoys me, because for this person, what is important to them is certainty. Can we please get in here and get to the job at hand? Give me the information I need to do my work. And I was able to share, okay, relatedness is really, really high for me. That's actually something that provides me with great fulfillment in my work. Just that little bit of time where we build genuine connection. So we compromised and we agreed that we would spend just the first 2 minutes of each of our one-on-one catch-ups talking about other stuff. You know, they had a puppy and I had other stuff going on, and we were able to just share that high level, just what we were both comfortable sharing, and then we could move into the work. And we had a wonderful, wonderful working relationship just from having that conversation. It's free. It's really easy. It's such a great opportunity to open really rich conversation with your team members. So I highly recommend using it. When you have you can even do workshops if if your whole team does it. Anyway, reach out to me and I can give you some more ideas. But when you have that data on what's important for each individual team member, then you are more able to target your interventions or your tactics or your behaviors to what is important to them. So for this team member example in particular, I knew that certainty was important to them. So I would never miss our one-on-ones, and I would let them know everything that's happening, including the things that haven't been decided yet. We're still working on this area. We're still talking about this. We're not sure what to do here. Things are still in motion, or things have been parked. Just making sure that they had a lot of visibility and a forum to ask questions. So using the SCARF model either broadly or more narrowly and specifically is going to reduce yourself and your team members from moving into that threat, fight, flight, or freeze zone, and really allow everyone to stay in that reward, sort of rest and digest. I'm really open and receptive to change because I feel safe zone. It has been a pleasure. I hope you found this information useful. I would love to hear from you. Please comment or send me a DM or email. And if you found it useful, I would really be grateful if you could share it with others in your network so we can spread the word. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll see you next time.